So what is the roadmap to becoming a great AR developer so that you can be ready when the Apple glasses comes in a couple of years' time? That's what this video is all about. Before we start, let's actually talk a little bit about the founders of Apple. Steve Jobs is not the only founder of Apple. There's also Steve Wozniak. Steve Wozniak was the technical guy. He built the hardware, programmed, and all the technical stuff. Steve Jobs was more of the marketing guy, the entrepreneur guy, selling, bringing funding, etc. It took the two to make a great product and a great company. Similarly, I believe to be a great AR developer, you just can't have just the technical side, but also the selling side, the marketing side. When you combine both the Steve Jobs and the Wozniak, that's something very powerful. And that gives context to the roadmap that I'm about to share with you. Here's the technical side. Number one, you need to build an iOS app. This involves learning first Swift, which is the programming language most often used to build iOS app. It replaced Objective-C quite a while ago. After Swift, you also need to learn Swift UI, which is the new UI framework used by Apple. After that, a bit of basics like the networking. So I don't mean networking in terms of meeting people, although that's also a useful skill, but I mean networking in terms of consuming data from third-party services. How to consume data from different APIs, consuming it in, say, JSON formats. And this is important, say, for example, you're building a weather app in AR and you need to consume weather data and feed it into your app, something useful. Finally, databases would be useful as well. For simple use cases like storing game volume or whatever, you could use user defaults. But for more complex cases, say if you're building a social AR app, you would need to have some sort of database technology. And for Apple, that may mean core data, Realm, etc. With these four, Swift UI, databases, and networking, I believe these would be enough to literally build anything you could think of. There might be more, but this is the bare minimum. So that's number one, learning how to build an iOS app. And number two would be getting into the AR side of things. You need to learn the AR frameworks for Apple. And this starts with ARKit. ARKit is the ground level closest to Metal SDK provided by Apple. And it essentially makes sense of the sensor data captured by the phone and transforms into AR functionality, like image tracking or anchor detection. So you need to learn ARKit and its different features. On top of that, there's RealityKit, which is a higher level SDK, again by Apple. And this is essentially like a game engine equivalent, purely dedicated for AR apps built by Apple. So it's replacing SceneKit, but purely for AR. This takes a lot of the boilerplate code for things like multiplayer, audio, inputs, etc. And finally, Reality Composer is essentially the highest level framework, which essentially requires no code. And this is like the PowerPoint for AR built by Apple, where you can literally build experiences without code. And I've done videos on that, which you can check here. And the beautiful thing is the Reality Composer, it's easily integrated with Xcode and the rest of the frameworks, so you can combine them together. These three would give you a nice solid foundation for building AR apps for Apple. So now with 1 and 2, you got the programming side of things done. And number 3 would be to move into 3D skills. So up until here, you probably would be using pre-made assets through online stores, focusing on your programming skills in particular, and not the 3D. Here, I would suggest starting with getting, again, pre-made assets online, and then adding some rigging and animation to it. Learning to do this in, say, Blender or other software. This would give you a nice skill set, which is essentially finding models that are static and free and rigging them up to do whatever animations you want in your app. Once you're comfortable with that, a bit more complicated step to take, if you have a VR headset, is to start with VR sculpting. You can sculpt 3D models in VR. And once you sculpt it in VR, you can make sure the resolution's low enough and downscale or do some post-processing. Then again, do the rigging, and then you have a nice 3D model to work with. Once you're comfortable with VR sculpting to create models, then finally focus on the traditional 3D modeling softwares like Blender and stuff. That's the most powerful and gives you most flexibility, but also the most time investment. So I would only recommend that towards the end. So that completes 3D skills. And number 4 now is UX and UI, user experience and user interface. So smartphone UI and UX is already a well-established field, but for AR and VR, it's a very new field because we're working in 3D, so the user interface will be different. It's very experimental at this stage, which means a lot of room to innovate and experiment and build your own standards. So number 4 would be to experiment and learn building your own UI, UX designs. Once you reach till here, iOS dev, AR frameworks, 3D skills, UX design, that would put you in a strong position so that you'll be ready when the Apple glasses comes to make great quality products that will surprise the world, I'm sure. Who knows, you may build the next Facebook or next Snapchat or next Instagram for AR. Once you've mastered all this, which is Apple focused, you're building essentially a deep specialty in one specific niche field. Once you've done that, then it would be a great time to expand into other areas like say Unity or Unreal, other game engines, which are more of cross-platform engines, so that you could build for multiple devices at once. So this is literally the roadmap that I'm following in my head. I'm not speaking from a rearview view mirror, being an expert and then looking back. It's more the other way around. So that's the technical side, developing the skill set to build great AR products for the Apple glasses that is coming soon. Now that you have the Steve Wozniak spirit instilled in you, next is to develop some of the Steve Jobs skills, the non-technical side. And here I can think of two things. Number one, very important entrepreneurial skill is to identify a great problem to solve. At the end of the day, that's what entrepreneurship is about. Solving big problems that are unmet currently using your unique creative approach. To do that, apart from your intuitive third eye that could detect great problems in your dreams or your shower, you also need a system to validate and disqualify bad ideas. And things like landing page validation method, using Google Trends, Google Keywords, and I've done videos on all of that, which you can see linked up here. So identifying a problem worth pursuing, I think is a great skill set to have. Second is app marketing. Again, number one common myth is that you built an app and put it out there and people will download it. No, it doesn't work like that. These days, traffic is hard, so you need to learn how to market the app. And under this, there are various skill sets involved. There's App Store optimization, which is the search engine optimization SEO equivalent for app stores. That essentially means filling in your App Store page with the right keywords. It boils down to finding keywords that have high traffic but low competition. Then there's also social media, how to build up a following there and an audience there who you could sell to. So apart from these skill set, which is essentially organic ways of getting more traffic, there's also paid advertising, how to run Facebook ads and the different things involved in that. So these are all the different things at marketing and identifying problems which I could think of would be very useful for AR developers, especially people who are so used to just doing the technical stuff. I think these are valuable assets to have. And for more AR tutorials for the Apple ecosystem, covering both the technical side and the business side, do follow my channel and subscribe, and I'll see you next week.